I always thought betrayal came from the outside, from strangers, from people you barely knew. Never in my wildest dreams did I think it would come from the very people who brought me into this world. My parents were supposed to be my protectors, my guiding light, the ones who had my back no matter what. I trusted them completely, so much that I handed over every cent I ever earned, thinking they were keeping it safe for my future. But that trust? It was shattered in the blink of an eye. One moment, I was on top of the world, ready to take the next big step in my life. The next, I was blindsided by a betrayal so deep, it left scars I still carry today. My parents not only stole my entire life savings, they kicked me out of the only home I had ever known. For years, I struggled alone, piecing my life back together brick by brick. And just when I thought I had left it all behind, life threw me a curveball I never saw coming. The same parents who destroyed me came back and begged for my help. I grew up believing my family was strong, loving, and unbreakable. We weren't rich, but my parents always taught me that love and loyalty mattered more than anything money could buy. My dad worked long hours at a factory, coming home late every night exhausted but still managing to ask about my day. My mom stayed home to care for me and my younger brother, cooking meals and making sure we had everything we needed. We lived in a small house that felt warm and safe, and I never doubted for a second that my parents wanted the best for us. When I turned 16, I wanted to help ease their burden. I applied for a part-time job at a local cafe and was thrilled when I got hired. My parents were so proud when I showed them my first paycheck. My mom hugged me tightly, eyes shining with pride, and my dad clapped me on the back and said I was growing up to be responsible. I remember the sense of pride I felt in that moment, thinking I was finally contributing to the family. From the start, my parents suggested putting the money into a savings account. They said it would be smart to save everything for my future. They promised that when the time came, all that hard work would pay off. Every week, I handed over my paycheck without question, trusting completely that my parents were handling everything. They even told extended family about how responsible I was, always bragging that their eldest child was working hard and thinking about the future. Over the next few years, I continued to work. During school breaks and holidays, I picked up extra shifts, often working long hours while my friends were out having fun. I skipped vacations, new clothes, and the latest gadgets because I had one goal in mind: saving enough money to attend university. By the time I turned 18, my savings had grown to nearly $30,000, 0 cents. It wasn't just money to me. It was the symbol of all my sacrifice, my dreams, and my hope for a better future. But as I look back now, I realized there were small cracks in the perfect picture I had painted of my family. Late at night, I would hear my parents arguing in hushed tones. Their voices were tense, and although I couldn't make out the exact words, I knew it was about money. I remember my mom reassuring me when I asked about it, saying everything was fine and I didn't need to worry. One incident stands out in my memory. In my final year of high school, I needed a recent bank statement for a school financial aid application. I asked my mom for it, and she hesitated just a little too long before saying she would handle it. Later that evening, she gave me a printed statement, and I noticed the numbers didn't quite match what I had expected. When I questioned her, she smiled and brushed it off, saying the bank had made a small error and everything was in order. I shrugged it off. These were my parents. Why wouldn't I trust them? They had always been there for me. Or so I thought. The day my acceptance letter arrived felt like the happiest day of my life. I still remember the crisp white envelope, my name printed neatly on the front, and inside, the words that made my heart race. "Congratulations! We are pleased to offer you admission." I ran home with tears in my eyes, bursting through the door and waving the letter in front of my parents. My mom's face lit up, and my dad gave me a proud nod. "See, we told you hard work would pay off," my mom said, wrapping me in a tight hug. For a brief moment, I felt like everything I had worked for was finally within reach. That evening, we sat around the dinner table. I laid out the next steps: tuition deposits, housing applications, deadlines. I was bubbling with excitement, rattling off all the things we needed to do. "So," I said with a grin, "we'll need to withdraw the money soon. The first payment deadline is in 3 weeks. Suddenly, the room went quiet. An awkward silence filled the air. My mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth, and my dad stared at his plate, his brow furrowed. I frowned, my heart skipping a beat. "What's wrong?" I asked. My dad let out a long sigh and set his fork down carefully. He looked at my mom, who gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "There's something we need to tell you," he said, his voice low. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What do you mean?" My mom's hands trembled slightly as she reached across the table, her eyes glossy with tears. We had to use your savings. I stared at them, blinking as if I had misheard. Use my savings? What are you talking about? My dad leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. We were behind on the mortgage, and there were medical bills when your brother got sick. We didn't want to worry you. We always thought we'd be able to put it back before you needed it. I could feel my chest tightening, my breathing becoming shallow. How much? I managed to ask, my voice shaking. My mom's tears began to fall. It's all gone. Oh, gone. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. The room seemed to spin. $30,000? I whispered. Everything I worked for? Gone? We didn't mean for this to happen, my dad said, his tone becoming defensive. We did what we had to do to keep this family afloat. I pushed my chair back violently, the legs scraping harshly against the floor. No, I shouted, my voice cracking. You stole from me. You lied to me for years. Tears blurred my vision as I stormed out of the kitchen and ran to my room, slamming the door behind me. I collapsed onto my bed, sobbing into my pillow, feeling like my entire world had just shattered. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced through every memory of working extra hours, every holiday I missed, every friend I turned down for a night out because I was saving for my future. And now, my own parents had destroyed it all. The following days were a nightmare. Every conversation with my parents turned into a shouting match. My mom kept crying and begging me to understand, but my dad grew colder and angrier. He kept insisting that family comes first and that I was being selfish for making a fuss. One evening, after a particularly explosive argument, my dad's voice rang out sharply. If you don't like how we've handled things, maybe you shouldn't be living under our roof anymore. I froze, staring at him in disbelief. You're kicking me out? After everything? He didn't answer, just crossed his arms and looked away. My mom sobbed quietly in the corner, whispering, "Please don't make this harder." But it was already unbearable. That night, I packed my things. I stuffed clothes and essentials into an old suitcase, my hands shaking the entire time. Every corner of the house seemed to echo with memories. Birthdays, movie nights, quiet afternoons spent in the backyard. It all felt like a cruel joke now. When I stepped out the door with my suitcase in hand, my mom stood there crying, but my dad stayed seated on the couch, refusing to look at me. I waited for a moment, hoping, praying for someone to say, "Stop, don't go," but no one did. I walked out into the cold night, alone, homeless, and heartbroken. The following weeks were some of the hardest of my life. I bounced between friends' couches, taking any work I could find, waiting tables, cleaning houses, babysitting. I barely slept, barely ate, just focused on survival. But something inside me hardened. Every time I thought about giving up, I remembered the betrayal, the way my parents had turned their backs on me, and I promised myself I would never depend on anyone else again. Years passed. I clawed my way up from rock bottom, working tirelessly and saving every penny. Eventually, I found a stable job, rented a small apartment, and started to rebuild my life on my own terms. I didn't hear from my parents once during all that time. Not a call, not a text, nothing. And as painful as it was, part of me was glad. I needed to put distance between us, to heal in my own way. But deep down, the scar they left on my heart never fully faded. It had been nearly 7 years since that night, the night I left home with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. 7 years of silence. 7 years of building my own life from scratch. I had learned how to stand on my own 2 feet, without anyone to lean on. I had carved out a quiet, steady existence, a small but cozy apartment, a good job, and a sense of independence that I was fiercely proud of. I had trained myself not to think about my parents. When memories popped up, I buried them deep. I thought I had moved on. I thought I was over it. Until one rainy afternoon, everything came rushing back. I was at home, enjoying a rare quiet moment when my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but some strange gut feeling made me answer. "Hello?" For a moment, all I heard was shaky breathing. Then a voice I hadn't heard in nearly a decade. It's your mother." I froze. I had imagined this moment so many times in my head, but now that it was real, I couldn't even form words. My chest tightened, and I felt my hands start to tremble. What do you want?" I managed to say, my voice cold and guarded. He sniffled. and I could tell she was crying. We're in trouble," she whispered. "Your father, he lost his job almost 2 years ago. We tried to keep up with the bills, but now we're drowning. The bank is foreclosing. We're about to lose everything." I said nothing, my heart pounding. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. The nights I had cried myself to sleep on a friend's couch. The endless double shifts. The cold, empty apartment I'd scraped together enough money to rent. I remembered my dad's voice, harsh and unforgiving. "Maybe you shouldn't be living under our roof anymore." And now, here they were, the same people who had betrayed and abandoned me, asking for my help. "We don't have anyone else to turn to," my mom sobbed. "Please, please, we're begging you." I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. I wanted to scream at her, to throw every ounce of pain and anger back in her face. But I stayed quiet, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "I don't know what to say," I finally muttered. There was a long pause. Then, in a voice so small and broken, my mom said, "We're so sorry for everything. We made terrible mistakes. We thought we were doing what was best at the time, but we know we hurt you. We've regretted it every day." I bit my lip, feeling a lump rise in my throat. Part of me had dreamed of this moment, a confession, an apology, but hearing it now didn't make the pain vanish. The betrayal still sat heavy on my chest, as raw and real as it had been all those years ago. "What exactly are you asking me for?" I asked, my voice flat. "We need help paying off the house, just enough to stop the foreclosure. If we lose it, we'll have nowhere to go." My mind spun. Was this karma? A cruel twist of fate? After all this time, they were the ones now facing homelessness, the very thing they had thrust upon me. "I need time to think," I said abruptly, and hung up before my emotions got the better of me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every painful memory. I remembered packing my bag in silence, my mom's tears, my dad's stony face. I remembered walking out into the night with no plan, no home, no hope. And now, they were on the other side of that same fear. Part of me wanted to turn my back, to let them feel the cold sting of abandonment the way I had. But another part of me, buried deep beneath the anger, still longed for closure, for some kind of peace. Days passed. My mom called again and again, each time leaving a voicemail more desperate than the last. I didn't answer. I spoke to close friends about it, weighing my options, turning the situation over and over in my head. Was helping them the right thing to do? Did they deserve it? Would I regret it if I didn't? In the end, I realized something important. Helping them wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about proving that despite everything, I had become a better, stronger person, that I could rise above the hurt, even if the wounds still ached. I called my mom back 1 week later. "I'll help," I said, my voice calm but firm, "but on my terms." She broke down in tears of relief, but I didn't let emotions cloud my judgment. I explained that any financial help would be handled through legal channels, with contracts and clear agreements. No blind trust, no loose promises. She agreed immediately, almost too eagerly. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the desperation of someone who had finally hit rock bottom. After we hung up, I sat there in silence, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. But I knew one thing for certain. No matter what happened next, I was the one in control now. And that, more than anything, was a victory of its own. In the weeks that followed, I helped my parents manage the immediate crisis. I didn't hand over cash directly. Instead, I worked with a lawyer to ensure that the mortgage payments were made securely and that there were safeguards in place. Every transaction was documented, every agreement signed. I was determined not to fall into the same trap twice. Through it all, my parents expressed their gratitude again and again. My mom cried on the phone, telling me how sorry they were, how ashamed they felt, and how they wished things had been different. My dad, who had once been so stoic and proud, sounded broken and defeated whenever we spoke. For the first time in my life, I heard genuine humility in his voice. But despite their remorse, something inside me had shifted permanently. The bond that once connected us, so strong and seemingly unbreakable, was now fragile and frayed. I couldn't bring myself to visit them in person, even though they invited me. Every time I heard their voices, a swirl of emotions hit me. Sadness, anger, pity, and a deep, lingering ache. I realized that forgiveness isn't always about reconciliation. Sometimes, forgiveness is about letting go of the weight you've carried for far too long. It's about freeing yourself, even if the relationship remains strained or distant. Over time, I found a sense of peace in knowing I had done what I felt was right. I hadn't helped them because they deserved it. I had helped them because I deserved to be free of the bitterness that had lived in my heart for so many years. Helping them was my way of closing the chapter that had haunted me for nearly a decade. Our contact became occasional short phone calls on holidays, polite check-ins every few months. There was no going back to how things used to be, and deep down, I knew that was for the best. Some scars never fully heal, no matter how much time passes. But despite everything, I stood taller. I looked at the life I had built for myself, the apartment I paid for, the career I had carved out, the independence I had fought tooth and nail to achieve, and I felt a fierce sense of pride. No one could take that away from me. Even now, there are moments when I look back and wonder how things might have been different if my parents had made better choices, if they had valued my trust the way I had valued theirs. But then I remind myself that while I couldn't control what they did, I could control how I responded, and that made all the difference. To anyone listening or reading this story, betrayal cuts deep, and sometimes it comes from those you least expect. But it doesn't have to define you. You can choose to rise, to rebuild, and to reclaim your power on your own terms. And if you were in my shoes, what would you have done?